Excuse me. Good evening, viewers. This is your host once again, Dr. Gilbert Gicharu Githere, coming to your home with Mazungumzo. And as you see on the screen here, we have a very interesting subject. And this is what I've been dealing with. And I've been dealing with the subject of others. As you know, the indigenous people during the colonial days and even now, they have always been addressed like others outside the dining table. When good things are being shared, the indigenous people have always gotten a raw deal. And this is why I'm looking at all kind of literatures to see what really made the Westerners believe that they were going to ignore all the values of the indigenous people and superimpose foreign values onto them. And I have followed this subject for long. I think you're all aware that I've been in this subject for long. One guy who addressed the issue of others, but he doesn't get credit, is Professor Richard Rorty. He taught for a while in Princeton University. And in 1979, he wrote a book, Philosophy and the Mirror of Nature. And he looked at philosophy and he realized the problem of others all stems from philosophy. Because in Western aesthetics, culture and values, the philosophers are like pillars of the society. They're given the responsibility of setting the trend of where people are going to go as it concerns values. So to make a long story short, in this book, Rorty had a chapter. You have to read the whole thing because this is a subject of people who really understand the background of philosophy. They understand Hume, they understand Descartes with treatise, they understand Martin Heidegger with Being and Time, they understand people like Plato with Theaetetus, and Strawson with issues of individualism, and people like Winckelstein, Tractus Philosophicus Tractus Logicus, where he said he talks about language is got game rules. So this program is for those advanced people who are doing these things. If you can comprehend, it doesn't matter to me. You can enjoy it if you like to watch it, but it is really meant for people who have digested some background of philosophy like Hegel and consciousness and philosophical dialectics. So in this book, Philosophy and the Mirror of Nature, Rorty shares a lot of things in this chapter. It is the subject he deals with is the people without minds, and he calls them Antipodeans. It's good to remember that word because I'm going to be referring to it, Antipodeans. He lifted it from a group of liberals, activists in the 60s, like psychedelic groups and hippies in Australia and New Zealand were these, activists, and they were called Antipodeans. So he picks these people, Antipodeans, and he brings them on to another Earth civilization. These people come to dwell with us on Earth here. Earthians. He calls us Earthians. Rorty calls us Earthians, humans, beings, Earthians, people of the earth. And when these people arrive, the Antipodeans, eh, they don't have the concept of the mind. Now, those people who know Githere, yeah, they know that this was his thing, the mind and body thing, the dualism. And everything, in the mind was full of ideas like a factory. And there were many huni, small people, manipulating ideas in people's heads. And the idea that Rorty is getting here, and it's very simple because he is going to take these Antipodeans and using them. It's just symbolism, using them because they have been told they have no minds. But one interesting thing about these Antipodeans is that they are very developed. Where they come from, they understand computers, the cybernetics. They are very advanced in electronics, technology, and things like geography, economics. So actually, they're in postmodern society, which is a very advanced stage. They have gone through things like industrial age, they have passed modernity, and they're into post-modernity. But the thing is, they have no mind. So you can understand in a Western concept, to have no mind is a very big thing to the philosophers because everything, abstractions, metaphysics, transcendence, thinking about abstract things, especially as it pertained to cosmology, the heavenly bodies, Copernicus, Galileo, is unheard of because Descartes could only perpetuate we think so we are, and we are more than animals. It is because he had stated clearly that we have minds. It's actually the essence that makes us humans. This is according to Western philosophers. Now, Rorty is very much against that. And he believes that all those philosophizing, Plato, meditations, and Aristotle, name it, Barton Russell, all those are assertions. And I can read a little bit as I go on, because the Antipodeans had beliefs and they were aware of being knowers. They especially knew they had moods about their robots or towards their pets. Also, they say they had moods against themselves. So you can imagine in Hegel or Hegelian, the self deciphers the self until it arrives at it is the person, it's the being. Self-consciousness arrives by thinking about oneself. One interesting thing about these aliens is that they don't consider robots and pets are persons like them. So what Rorty establishes in this discussion, because it's very important when you want to say language is the basis of existence. Everything that exists because of language. Even our souls, to say we have souls and we are not immortal, it all comes from language. Because it's people who discuss who we are, who are we, as humans. And they discussed among themselves, different groups, different times. They discussed who are we. And they arrived at a conclusion because they are using language that they are human beings because they can analyze the self. What makes a person in the Antipodian world is immaterial. They are not like humans who have criteria of what makes a person: mind, consciousness, and spirit, and many other entities. They just knew they were different from other people. This topic of Rorty, this particular part, is where he establishes that language is the only thing humans need to acquire knowledge, to know themselves and to know others. And others, I mean even the material world, the external world, from the self. So you can see Antipodeans, one very important thing is that the Antipodeans, they believed they were immortal. And this trait was so true of their pets, their robots. This trait made them very different from humans who had to deal with death. Because you see, they are forever. The Antipodeans believe they are forever. Now you see, the concept of dying is what the self, in most of his time, he is involved on addressing himself when he is not there. Power is all based, if I'm not there, what legacy am I going to leave? So you can see the Antipodeans, because they did not have that problem, they did not deal with mortality. That one time they will cease to exist in the world, because that is the essence of the problem of humans. And their immortality did not involve soul. You see, they did not believe when somebody perishes and you bury him, there is this time he will wake up and they will be singing and there will be a final celebration and they will go to this place and they will live forever. The Antipodeans did not have that concept. So you see, it saved them a lot of problems. But the earth people, now Rorty uses, Rorty uses a very nice word. They are called Terrans, Terrain, Terrans. So they are the Earthians, the people who live on Earth. And the Earth people are very interested in these others, because they want to kind of philosophize on them. And then at the end of the day, they're going to say these are 1/3 animal and 2/3 humans. Because you see, in the US, and I'm going to just point on this, the Caucasians could not enslave the African people who they brought to the Americas before they philosophized using Darwin's theory, Charles Darwin's, the origin of man. That human beings develop from small creatures to orangutans to human beings. And that is why they were able to say the Africans who they brought to America had developed 2/3 to be humans, but 1/3 they were not yet there. And so during the slave time, all the statistics of the African Americans were kept in the Department of the Interior or together with the animal. They were kind of stock. They were like cattle. So you see, these philosophers were very important. They are the ones who philosophized about Africans and arrived at they have not developed properly, and for that matter, they can be put and outside and live in herd of cattle working for the master, because they had philosophized. So you see, Rorty is trying to say philosophers are not the foundation of knowledge. without even philosophers, but with language, humans would develop as good as they are now to better their lives. Because one striving thing about humans is that they're always striving to make their lives better. It is good to note Antipodeans have philosophers, and they concern themselves with four things in their nature of being. Now, that's a very interesting thing. The Antipodeans, who are from another planet, they have philosophers. Now, what Rorty is saying here subtly and in a very tacit way, that the colonizers should have realized that the indigenous people, as crude as they looked, they had very concrete values. They had very concrete cultures. They had rituals. They had religions. They had an economic system. They had an educational system. They had geography. They had biology. They had chemistry. They had medicine. But they just needed to understand how these things are done by the indigenous people. Just kind of be observers, not cultivators of a civilization as their own image, creating people to be in their own image. So the philosophers in the Antipodean world, they also pondered about supreme being and having mind and matter. But they had no concepts of subjects and objects. That's very smart. They did not have that nonsense. Not nonsense, really, don't take me wrong. I mean, they did not dwell on subjects and objects. And their spring being was very much alive, had the responsibility of resurrection. Because I say this, they were immortal. So at one time, when they resurrect and they come back to life again, as life is a perpetuate, it's a reproduction of itself. They come back. They also take care, the supreme beings of the Antipodeans, they take care of the non-existent things. Also, issues of morality was in their realm. And these things, if you look clearly, they are in this, you can read. Philosophers of the Antipodeans also involved themselves in looking or scrutinizing subjects like skepticism. And now, this is a good thing to note. They did not believe in ideas. Descartes was non-starter when it came to Antipodeans. So what Rorty is telling you, for you to arrive at believing language is the only thing you need to develop and acquire knowledge, you had to negate most of the things like idealism, the dualism of body and mind. He kind of says, before you get yourself to be clearly knowing what you're doing, you got to negate those kind of ideas. Neither did they contribute to the existence of perception. So Kantianism, because Kant is based on how a human being starts like a tabula rasa and starts to acquire knowledge from a perception. Then you create concepts, intuitions, notions, and then you come to things like ideas, and then you come to thinking, cognition, and then you start to be a thoughtful person. And then the language within the Kantian belief of the pure, the critique of pure reason, language is not important. It seems this consciousness, where Descartes had said the mind acquires things from external being and makes a human being have this intelligent self, and it becomes an intelligent self from externally, from the powers that be of spiritualism, brings all these ideas of wisdom, as the Greeks would call it, or even people, indigenous people use wisdom for education, people who are really educated. The mental representation were absent in their discourse. Their immortality was not discussed from the angles of metaphysics. Instead, it was from a positivistic angle. Because you must hear now, Oman van Quine, the two dogmas of empiricism, analysis and synthetics, is what actually the Antipodeans are really involved in. Dewey, Carnap, Frege, Wittgenstein, they seem to contribute to that kind of being. What was common between these aliens and us humans was language, life, technology, and philosophy. But you have seen they negate several things: ideas, feeling, thinking, perception, intuition, which are the basis of acquisition of knowledge in the Western concept, as the philosopher being the king. Excuse me. Antipodeans were experts at neurology and biochemistry. Most of their technological life and general conversation centered around these two disciplines. The nervous system was at the center of their knowledge. Check that. If a child neared the fire in the Antipodean world, Rorty tells us, it would say, "Hey, hell, stimulate his C fibers." He will stimulate his C fibers. C fiber, C-F-I-B-E-R-S, fibers, C fibers, synapses, nerves. If an Antipodean child says that, it shows he has touched fire. Let's say a kid touches a hot stove. He has simulated his C fibers. They did not have the word pain. So you see, language, you name things according to your values, according to your needs, and how you see fit. That's why languages are different. They pass information and help people to communicate, but they don't have to be English or Arabic or French to have depth and knowledge in them that you can impart onto others using technology, cybernetics. All these things are inbuilt within the, let's say, for example, Yoruba, Igbo, Kikuyu. The language has all the values. Quantum physics is within the language of the Yorubas. It's a given thing by this being that has given Earth what it has, the values. Because matter has life. You remember when I discussed the digital objects, whether they have life. we came to discover that matter has an energy, is alive. We are alive. The whole Gaia system is a living thing, including buildings and stones and everything. They have life. And this very much is a concept of the indigenous knowledges of the Africans, if you remember very well. People like Mundibe, if you read V.S. Mundibe, if you read Kwame Appiah, if you read Molevia Santa, these are philosophers, Lucius Outlaw, these are philosophers. If you read Cornel West, they bring this thing out in different ways. Excuse me, people. I'll wind up. I will stop the first recordings and I'll talk on the phone until I start again. Ciao, ciao.